A sermon. Things like old girlfriends, probably not a good thing to talk about in a sermon. Bathroom humor, probably not a good idea. Run-ins you've had with the law, not things you want to talk about in a sermon. Well, this won't be the first time that I tell you a story that I probably shouldn't tell you. You see, in our Bible reading for today, Jesus turns water into wine. Now, I've never turned water to wine, but I have turned water into beer. It's true confessions time. I've brewed a few batches of beer in my life. Now, one of those batches was with a great friend of mine from seminary. His name is Justin. And he received a call to serve in a church in Michigan. And shortly after relocating to Michigan, they had their second child. Her name was Peyton. And she was born there, and we were honored to be asked to serve as Peyton's godparents. And so we journeyed out to Michigan for the baptism, and we extended our stay for a while to spend some vacation time with our good friends, Justin, Anna, and then their two kids. Well, while we were out there, Justin and I decided we were going to get a little adventurous, and so we went out and purchased one of you've seen these before, these home brewer kits. So we purchased one of those. Now, if I remember correctly, our wives, as we walked in the door with this big kit, they just rolled their eyes. Yes, what goons, I'm sure they thought. So we got out all the supplies. We boiled a big pot of water. We sieved the grains. We threw in the hops. We did all this stuff. We had this sort of rusty, clumpy bucket of stuff when we were done, and we were supposed to put that then into these bottles. Well, now, the final step in filling the bottles involves adding a little bit of sugar to each of the bottles. The sugar then creates the carbonation. As you add the sugar, it reacts with the yeast to create bubbles. So the last thing you do before putting the cap on is you put a little sugar into the bottle. Again, I said a little sugar. Emphasis on little. Well, being the jugheads that we were, Justin and I, we sort of guessed how much sugar to put into the bottles, and thinking it's better to err on the side of excess, too much, we just dumped away, and that was that. We put the caps on, and now the bottles sit for a few weeks until they're ready to consume. Well, a couple days later, Katie and I took off for home. And our little adventure was history. It was history, that is, until I received a call from this old pal of mine, Justin. His first words went like this: "Remember the beer? I think we used too much sugar." It goes on to remind me how before we left town, we took these bottles and we stowed them away. And because their house is kind of small, we decided to put the cases under his daughter's crib. Please don't scold us for that. They'd be out of the way there. No one would get it. Well, in the middle of the night, Justin and Anna woke to chaos. The first sign of chaos was the sound of their screaming baby dog. And then there was the sound of their dog, in their daughter's room barking at the top of his lungs. And finally, the most prominent sign that something was not right was the sound of shattering bottles. Do you remember that whole thing about the sugar and the carbonation I talked about? Yeah. Well, in the middle of the night, those bottles hid under baby Peyton's crib, under the pressure of extreme carbonation, started to shatter. They exploded, one after another. My buddy said it was kind of like the 4th of July. I'm glad it was his house and not mine. And of course, as you can imagine, in the middle of the night, it threw their house into chaos. The dog was barking. Baby Peyton was crying. Their older son stumbled out of his room, totally confused. Anna tripping over toys, grabbing Peyton out of the crib, and Justin, knowing he was in big trouble, was trying to figure out how he was going to get these still shattering bottles out of the house before his wife killed him. Again, I'm glad it was not my house. Folks, today we read a story. We read the story of Jesus turning water into wine. And I think like Justin and Anna, sort of glassy-eyed, being alarmingly woken in the middle of the night to bursting glass, a dog barking, a baby crying, this story is another epiphany story that should just throw us into chaos. It should wake us up, folks. You see, the story is Jesus' first sign to the people of that time. It was a story that revealed to them that he was something special. He was something more. He's at this wedding, at the wedding dance. You've been there. And the wine is running out. And at the encouragement of his mother, he tells the servant to go fill those big old jars with water, and they do. But when they taste it, it's wine. And not just wine, it's the best wine. And we're not talking a bottle or two. We're talking gallons upon gallons upon gallons, more than the wedding party could ever consume. And I don't quite get what happened that day. But that author wanted us to know, without a doubt, that this Jesus wasn't any ordinary guy. He wasn't your average Joe. This Jesus of Nazareth. He was something so much more. And folks, that's what Epiphany is about. We're in this little season of the church here called Epiphany. And it's about us, like those first century folks who would have run into Jesus, heard stories and rumors. It's revealed to us as we read these stories who this Jesus really is. We walk with some of those first century people these days as they come to find out, and they are astonished that this guy from Nazareth isn't any kid. This is the Son of God. I imagine them looking and hearing these stories and going, "You've got to be kidding me." And folks, that's what this time of year is about in the life of the church, this Epiphany time. A couple of weeks ago, you may remember that we read the story of the Magi, those astrologer guys who wound up at the stable. Those guys who followed the star, who practiced all kinds of other faiths. They were one of the first to meet Jesus. They're in that stinky barn with all the animals and those bonehead shepherds, and it's revealed to them of all people, that this Jesus is the Son of God. And then last week we heard the story of Jesus' baptism, and I don't quite get it, but we heard that the heavens were parted and it declared clear to all that this is my Son, the beloved, God's own Son. And now Jesus is turning water into wine. And not only that, but Jesus breaks into this world, and from the very beginning, Jesus shatters. He shatters all the preconceived notions of who God is and what God is up to. You see, from the moment Jesus came into this world, like my friends Justin and Anna, and the chaos of that night with the busted bottles and their dog barking, confused kids, from the moment Jesus came into this world, he sends people spinning. This can't be. This isn't the God we grew up with. I mean, think about the story that we tell. This is God's Son, the Messiah, and he's born to a nobody woman, an unwed teenage mother. Not in a hospital, but a barn behind an old motel. And the first to meet God's Son, the shepherds, those outsiders, the Magi from far away. And then Jesus goes out to this nutball of a guy, John the Baptist, who wants to baptize him. And the Son of God wants to be baptized by this crazy guy who's out in the wilderness, camel's hair, eating grasshoppers, and then he's turning water into wine. I imagine it would have sent people talking and wondering and gossiping. If this is really the Son of God, this God doesn't work the way I learned about God in Sunday school. This God is far too messy. This God didn't come as we expected, in power, in might, with armies. This God came and he's messy, and he hangs out with messy people with their messy lives. This is not what we expected at all. Folks, these first few stories of Jesus' life announced news that was earth-shattering way back when. And it was more than most could handle, I think. And And that's why from the moment that the word goes out that Jesus had arrived here in this world, people like Herod are threatened by Jesus, and they're after him. Because he sort of shatters everything. It was a big deal way back then. And so it kind of makes me wonder why. Why aren't we today more shocked when we hear these stories of faith in the Bible? If these stories shattered people's lives way back when, why don't they seem to do much today? Now, I don't know about you, but it seems like we're rarely surprised by our faith, by the stories of our faith. Dare I say, we often approach our faith maybe sort of expecting to be a little bored. I wonder why. Maybe it's because the pastor gives such long, boring sermons. That could be it. Or maybe it was all those long, boring film strips we had to watch in Sunday school. Or maybe it's because the story's not new anymore. We've heard it before. Or maybe it's because we don't really get the Bible. Or maybe if we're honest, if we're real honest, maybe we've been taught to keep this faith stuff, this story of Jesus. I wonder if we've been taught to keep this faith stuff sort of at arm's distance, to keep it at arm's length away, sort of keep it in a safe place, not to let it penetrate us too deeply. Because I think if we really were to hear this story of our faith, if we were to really wonder what this Jesus meant to those first followers way back when, and what this Jesus could mean for us today, oh my. I mean, I imagine it would shatter a whole lot of our well-laid plans. It could send our lives into chaos to really claim that this Jesus is the one we follow, this Jesus who hung out with outsiders, who loved sort of questionable people. If he's really the model of our life, I think that's too much for most of us. This Jesus talked about things we don't like to talk about, things like money and how we treat the poor by what we do or we don't do. And those first followers, they gave everything away. The disciples, they dropped everything to follow Jesus. Folks, it would be far too alarming, too chaotic, too earth-shattering. If we were to totally embrace this Jesus, it would mess up our lives even more than they're already messed up. And yet, maybe that's what God's really up to in Jesus. Turning things upside down. Coming not for the high and mighty, those who have it all together, those whose lives seem oh so perfect, but rather coming for those whose lives are kind of messy. Those who don't have it all together. Maybe the earth-shattering revelation in Jesus is that Jesus comes for people like you and me. People like you and me, just as we are, with all our rough edges. Like those shepherds, like those faithless magi, like that crazy John the Baptist out in the wilderness. Even those guests at the wedding probably had more than enough. Folks, during Epiphany, this time of the year, we're reminded in these stories that we read that when Jesus steps onto the scene, Jesus shatters all expectations. He shatters all their expectations with one simple gift. And it's the gift of love. He stepped into this world with